Philippians. The big topic in Philippians is becoming a servant. In the Ephesians level, we learned to pour on the word in order to get ourselves fixed. Very much working on ourselves. The relationships that we dealt with in Ephesians was get your side of the equation fixed. Once you get your side of the equation fixed, that may solve the problem on the other side because they may be reacting to something you're doing that's obnoxious. And so we have to get ourselves fixed before we get into the Philippians level. Because when we get into the Philippians level, now we're going to start helping other people. And helping other people is the essence of being a servant. Now let's look at this word servant. In Philippians 1:1, it says, Paul and Timothy, servants of Yeshua Messiah, to all the holy ones who are in Yeshua Messiah, who are at Philippi, with the elders and the ministers. The elders refers to apostles. The ministers literally means servants. Now, in the Greek, the word is diakonos, and that's where we get our word deacon, and it simply means servant. And so at this level, at the Philippians level, we graduate into becoming deacons, meaning that we are graduating into becoming servants, meaning that we've finished working on ourselves pretty much, and we have some mental attitude issues that we still have to work on. But pretty much we've worked on our side of the relationships, and now we're going to start helping other people. And this means that we have to do a lot of work on ourselves before we get to this level. This is a big problem that people have. The rejection of the path. A lot of times it comes from people who think they have arrived as baby believers. They are out evangelizing, they're out, doing things, telling people what they should be doing and so forth, and they think that they don't need to work on themselves. And so they don't need the path. The path is essential. Without the path, you can't get yourself fixed. And the path identifies sins. A lot of times we think we're good to go because we haven't identified some of the sins that we need to deal with. And the servant assignments that we're going to get in this level is going to help us to identify those sins. But there's a lot of things that we have covered in the path that have identified a lot of other sins that we had to work on, and we had to pour on the word in order to get those work done, and we had to really concentrate on ourselves first and get those things fixed before we can get to the Ephesians level and start helping other people. And so if you're trying to help other people instead of concentrating on yourself to get yourself fixed, you're never going to get yourself fixed. And as a result, you will never get to this Philippians level. And this kind of arrogance needs to be identified. And the way that you fix this problem is going back to the beginning and starting over and really concentrating on yourself and just dropping the idea of fixing anybody else while you're in that mode. Now the word servant in the Hebrew is shamash, and so that's probably the word we need to use. but it means servant. In Philippians 2, 5 through 8, it really gets into this idea of being a servant. It says, "And think this in yourselves, which Yeshua Messiah also thought, who, as he was in the likeness of God, did not consider it extortion to be equal with God, but he emptied himself and took on the likeness of a servant, and was in the likeness of men, and was found in fashion as a man. And he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross." So humbling yourself is the first thing that has to be done in order to be a servant. And we're not going to graduate from being a servant into being an overlord, over everybody else as an apostle. Instead, as an apostle, we're going to be a better servant. As an apostle, we are going to work as a servant. We're going to be helping other people. That's going to be our job. So getting good as a servant is what we need to learn at this level, so that as an apostle, we can be good as a servant. And but just think about the humbleness that Yeshua had to go through. He was God. He already knew all of this stuff. He was ready to go when he was born. And yet he humbled himself. He had a normal job, did what his parents told him to do for 30 years of his life. And then after that, he went out and he fasted for 40 days and was baptized by a man, John the Baptist. So he really had to humble himself before he became the apostle that was going to help other people. And we really need to get a hold of this humbleness before we can move on. There is qualifications for being a shamish, a servant, and these are given in 1 Timothy 3, verses 8 through 13. Now, this is given in 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy is written to apostles. How do you operate a congregation as an apostle? That's the question in Timothy. Which means that these qualifications are supposed to be evaluated by an apostle. They are then ratified by the congregation, but the apostle is the guy who has to look at people and evaluate them. Okay, and he does that according to these instructions. Let's read it. 1 Timothy 3, 8 through 13. Likewise, deacons or servants must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. Now this is the first part of the test, and this part is what the apostle looks at a person and sees. And what is he seeing? Are they holy? In other words, are they using the growth use of Yeshua's prayer to grow in holiness? Are they dedicated to this kind of growth on the path? And are they operating in righteousness according to the level where they're at? Whatever sins that have been agreed to in the congregation, are they operating according to that level of righteousness? not double-tongued. That's talking about reliability, keeping your promises, something that has come up in the past. Not given to much wine. We discussed that in Ephesians, the idea of being filled with the Spirit rather than filled with wine. Not greedy for money. Very important. Each disciple has to be dedicated to this idea that we're not going to be taking money from our disciples because it muddies the water. Okay? And this is especially true in today, now that Christianity, a lot of problems have come up within that system where money has been involved. Once they fulfill those requirements, then in verse 10 it says, let these be tested. In other words, once they fulfill the first requirements, then they're ready for a deacon test or a deacon assignment. And let them serve as deacons or servants and be found blameless. In other words, they have to pass the test. So what is a shamash assignment? Well, it's where it's some sort of service that the congregation needs. In the Philippians level, we want to do a basic test, meaning that it should be within the congregation. We've talked about the idea of doing the meal, the shared meal, providing food for that. Okay, so that would be an excellent shamash assignment. Okay, but there's a lot of other things. In Acts, it talks about giving food, distributing food to the widows. Okay, now that one is probably an assignment that is an advanced assignment, which we will do in the Colossians level, the next level up. And why would that be advanced? Because you're going to run into outsiders, because you got to take the stuff across town, right? So anything where you're going to run into outsiders is going to turn into an advanced test. But a basic test is something that you would do inside the congregation. And the congregation needs to come up with these assignments and assign them to the various people, and of course with their consent. And then there needs to be an evaluation of the test to see, were they walking in the Spirit during that test? Okay, and so along with this test, you need to complete the Philippians level, and that's what it talks about in the next section. Likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Messiah Yeshua. So these kinds of assignments are going to give us boldness. We're going to be able to handle outsiders. We're going to be able to operate as an apostle if we have passed the deacon tests. Let's look at these things a little bit closer. Their wives must be reverent and not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. And they have to rule their house. This is talking about their house, okay? So their house has to be operating correctly, meaning that if the wife is an idolater and is not going to operate as a helper for the apostle, then he's going to have a problem. He's going to be distracted, and he is not going to be able to do his job fully. He needs to get this settled. And in Philippians, it starts talking about how do you deal with the other side of the fence. We have fixed ourselves. We're operating fully righteously on our side of the fence. We are treating people correctly. We're treating our wives correctly. And let me point out that apostles can be women. They are mentioned in the New Testament. There's also prophetesses in the Old Testament. So everywhere you turn, you're seeing women operating as apostles or prophets. Prophets is the other word for apostle. Okay, but what this means is that if you're a woman, then your husband has to be on board in order for you to be able to function properly as an apostle. Okay, so as we go through Philippians, we're going to talk about, well, how do we get this other side of the fence fixed? If we're having problems with our spouse and we are doing everything correctly on our side, okay, then we need to start doing things in order to help them to come along or to sever the relationship. Now, the first thing we're going to do is try to get the thing fixed. Second thing we're going to do is, if it doesn't get fixed after all of that, then you sever the relationship so that they're no longer in your house. And that way you have everything in your house fixed so that you're not getting this kind of distraction. Same thing with children. If you're not operating correctly towards your children, which is what we dealt with in the Ephesians level, then you're going to have problems with your children. Now, you can't sever the relationship with the children, right? Once they get to be older teenagers, then you may have to do that sort of a thing. But most of the problems that we have with children and most of the problems that we have with wives are on our side of the fence. We have to get our side fixed, and it's very difficult to see our own problems. When we have a problem with the wife or with the children, we look at them and we say, oh, those guys are doing it wrong. Well, that's because we see that very easily. We can see that speck in the other person's eye, and we don't see the log in our own eye. And that's why you have to get all of this fixed in the Ephesians level before you move into this stuff. Because if you're not fixed on your end, there's no way you can fix the other side of the fence. But we're going to talk about some other things here in the Philippians level about how to fix these relationships. Helping them and being a servant to them to help them get fixed is really a major part of this level, where we learn to be a servant. We learn to help the other side. Okay, so that's the qualifications for deacons that explain, and I've explained to you how we're going to set up an assignment, preferably with inside of the congregation somehow, that we're going to be able to put ourselves to the test to see if we can walk in the Spirit while doing a service. And this is going to really start identifying issues that we have. We have mental issues, and Philippians is going to talk quite a bit about how to fix mental issues. And these assignments are going to identify those issues that we have so that we can work on them. Because by the end of the Philippians level, if we have passed this test, then we're going to be at the level of where we are blameless, as it says here. Okay, blameless means operating at 100% righteousness. So you can't get out of the Philippians level until you're operating at 100% righteousness, and that means the household is fixed. Okay, all of this stuff has to get sorted out before you move on to the Colossians level, and and getting ourselves fixed is really the humbling to the path that has to happen before we even move into the Philippians level. Okay, so that talks about the idea of being a servant, and really this is the major issue in the Philippians level.